My guest at this time is going to battle Calvin Tankman in an opening round of the Opera Cup this Saturday night at MLW Fightland. It is M-Dog Matt Cross. Matt, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me here today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, well, let's start off here. Like I said, this Saturday night, MLW Fightland, you, Calvin Tankman, opening round match of the Opera Cup. What do you think of the competition you're going to be standing across the ring from here?
It's going to be awesome. It's the first time ever, which always excites me. I mean, I've been in this business now 22 years, so it gets harder and harder to find guys that I haven't wrestled yet. So Kelvin is one of them. It's always amazing to see how you're going to match up against somebody. I think that's one of the insane things about what we do. So it's like we're going to show up that day and whatever happens, happens. You know, it's like, who knows? Styles clash, personalities clash. You never know what you're going to get into. I think that I personally have my best matches against competent big men, so I'm looking forward to it. Mil Muertes in Lucha Underground, Matanza. I mean, there were so many guys. Was Bronson Reed? I wrestled in like Melbourne, Australia. Like so many big guys I've just had amazing matches with. So if I go off that, there's a lot for me to be excited about. And yeah, looking forward to Saturday.
Yeah, and this is, of course, going to be part of the Opera Cup. It's going to be a tournament structure here. What's it mean to you to be having the Opera Cup on the line? This is something that Davey Boy Smith Jr. personally bequeathed to MLW and Court Bauer, it sounds.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's just a huge opportunity for me. And that's like all I've ever asked for, right? It's like, again, I've been wrestling for over 2 decades, and I just, even to this day, like, want and ask for a shot. And I feel like this is a shot. This is a chance to be seen. This is a chance to do something. And that's all that I've ever asked for. So it's awesome. You know, a lot of eyes are going to be on us. I know some of this stuff's going to air on Vice, and I'm a personal big fan of Vice as a complete separate aside. So I think it's pretty awesome that they have pro wrestling because I watch the channel anyway.
Sure.
And so to have those eyes, and I mean, you have to have letters associated with you in this business, whether it's ABC Wrestling or whatever it is, you have to have those things sort of with you for fans to understand and follow your journey. So here are those letters to be associated with. Here's a cup. Here's something with history. Here's a chance to be seen on television. I mean, it's a great recipe.
Yeah, and you know, it is. It's an awesome time right now for MLW and for you to be in that mix, man. And like this Opera Cup really flush, right? This is a very deep bench going into the Opera Cup this year. One name that I saw on the list I think would be a lot of fun to see you with. I believe you guys may have shared ring space before, but that's Bobby Fish. Like, what does it mean to you to have Bobby Fish in the mix here for the Opera Cup this time around?
Yeah, I think that would, as far as if we get a singles, that would also be a first time ever. So there's a lot of cool opportunities. My favorite memory, I think, with him was I tagged with Darby Allin against the two of them with a Red Dragon for Defy in Seattle. In my opinion, Defy has the best independent crowd in the country right now. So to be able to do that a couple years ago was just phenomenal. And it was sort of like wrestling 101, and everything clicked and came together. And we just had this match that we're just hitting on all cylinders, and it was so much fun. So to get the chance to kind of distill that down to just the two of us. Now I got my new Chrome Dome look, I guess. So before that, everyone was always mistaking me for him also. So there's so many tweets where it's like, you look like Bobby Fish. And I would think he hears the same. So it's like a Highlander thing. There can be only one. So maybe him and I need to face each other to find out who gets this look or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, if they can battle over the letter T in WCW, I think who could be the bald guy is not out of the realm of possibility here.
Right.
You brought up the match from Defy there. Yeah, I was looking on your socials here earlier today, seeing what's up with you. You were just hanging out with Darby the other day, it looks like. What were you guys doing? Some kind of punk rock bowling thing? What was
it's called punk rock bowling. I think there is a bowling component sort of historically. I didn't bowl, Darby didn't bowl, but it sort of morphed into or involves bands as well. So it's kind of like the premier event in punk rock. It's 3 days long in Las Vegas every year, and it's just like the who's who in punk rock. And without punk, I wouldn't be a wrestler. It was so funny to me. I think even my caption for that photo was something along the lines of, so many people approached me over the 3 days and were like, we can't believe you're here. This is so crazy. And I had to laugh to myself because I was going to punk shows long before I was wrestling. And I'll go until the day I die. If I die at a punk show, awesome. So it was just funny because they only know you from a certain universe. And when you cross over to this music scene, which is I'm much more comfortable in, and I belong even more so than wrestling, they're like, we can't believe you're here. And I'm like, of course I would be. This is why I'm alive, and this is why I'm here. So it was my sort of weekend off, just to enjoy myself, which is funny as a wrestler because you always couple that with this tinge of guilt because you're like, oh, I should be wrestling, I should be out there, I should be doing it. And I almost had to, some fans' tweets helped me kind of keep it in perspective. They're like, no, you're allowed to have some time off and you're allowed to enjoy yourself and you don't have to fall on your head every weekend of your life. So it was a week. Well, not that I didn't fall on my head still, but I was getting hurt in a different universe for once. And Darby's also a big fan of punk rock, so he was there as well to see a lot of the bands. Youth of Today was a big second wave straight edge band, so I was happy to see him in the pit, in the mix. I saw
Darby Allin was in a pit this past weekend with you, I'm guessing, moshing and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. So it was pretty. I would imagine a pretty awesome experience for some of the fans who happened to catch us together, because that would have been mind blowing in some degree to be like, wait, is that so and so? Is that so? Are they in the pit? Are they jumping on our heads and slamming into us? And so it was. I know I saw him. You couldn't stage dive because there was a gap, but I saw him sort of crowd surfing. I also was crowd surfing at one point. So I mean, if you were a wrestling fan, we were like quite literally jumping on your heads. So hopefully that was a cool moment for some people.
I would imagine that created quite a scene. Do you feel like when you're in the pit and people realize it's you and Darby that they're nicer, or do they get rougher because they're like, oh my God, it's the wrestling guys, we should be able to throw them around right now?
I've worried about that from time to time. Like, are they like, well, I've always wondered if I could be a wrestler. Should I sort of test myself against these guys? Or like, I can't go to a wrestling show and slam them, but I could totally do it here. So luckily I haven't encountered that yet. Hopefully I never do. Generally, people are just so psyched because these are really sort of underground niche bands. So they're just excited that someone that they know from another platform is enjoying this thing that's so small. And you know, when these shows come to Cleveland, there's 20, 30 people. So when they see you there, they're like, you like this really weird thing that I also like. So they're just so psyched to see you there. And it's never to the point of, you know, maybe if you went to like, I don't know, a U2 show or something and you were like mega famous, it might get to the point where it was annoying. But for me, it's, you know, a handful of people at these small punk shows. So all the interactions were really positive and cool.
Wow. All right. Couple things coming out of it real quick. And I promise we'll get back to Fightland here in a second. But one, I thought it was because when I saw the photo of you and Darby, I thought it was you with a fan dressed as Darby because his face was kind of hidden. And then it took us, I was like, that's actually Darby Allin. Darby's a very private guy, I know. What's it like to be friends with Darby Allin? I don't know that I've ever met anybody who's really kind of close or hung out with Darby Allin before, I guess.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting to me. I'm a bit taken aback because I don't know him in that regard, because it's I guess similar to CM Punk, where sometimes these guys have like their circles and then they're a touch wary of people outside of their circles, which I understand because in both cases you almost sort of blow up overnight and then the interest level is crazy. And then it's like, well, who are all these new people and what are they interested in me and what are they interested in? It's just like a different world for those people. So sometimes they'll, you know, I don't want to speak for them, but sometimes they may retract and be like, well, let me stick with who I know and whose intentions I know. And sort of, there's some comfort there. But yeah, he's cool. I mean, we're both straight edge and we're both into these really strange bands. So, you know, there's almost an instant connection. To draw that CM Punk parallel again, when I first met him, it was like 2001. We're independent wrestlers. He lives in Chicago. I'm in Cleveland. They're very similar Midwestern cities. I think I was wearing a Misfit shirt. He was wearing a Misfit shirt, and we're both straight edge. So it wasn't. It was inevitable in some ways. You know, you're like, oh, what's up, other dude who's also parallel universe me? So it's sort of the same. So whereas with Punk, we were almost the same generation. He was slightly before me, so I was looking up to him in some regards. And maybe there's some elements now with Darby and myself. So there's almost this weird timeline of like, okay, like there's this, I don't know, brethren or this passing or carrying of the torch between like the genuine punk straight edge community wrestlers. So for us, it's all very familiar. And yeah. So I mean, I saw him and instantly it was cool to see him there. And again, like he was in the pit, in the mix, and everything. So it was a lot of fun for both of us.
Yeah, last thing that guy needs is head to be broken open by some idiot with a steel-toed boot. I'm sure Tony Khan loves that. Anyway, so you we're just talking now about the straight edge thing, and until I was kind of looking into you again today, I'd forgotten that you were straight edge, right? And it's like such a part of your culture. It would seem like, you've had this amazing 22-year career. I mean, you've worked for just about everybody at this point since you started. And I think 2000, 2001, right?
Yeah.
I remember briefly sharing space with you, I think, with Resistance Pro here in Chicago with
cool.
Billy Corgan back in the day. How much has being straight edge helped you weather these decades here now in the business? Like, how much has that really, you think, been a part of your success, I guess, when it comes to pro wrestling?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I always thought it would help me a little bit more because I pride myself in being like reliable, and it's just if you and I make plans for 2023 at noon on May 4th, if I'm not there, I'm dead. That's how I operate. So it's like I'm just anything that I say I'm going to do, I do to a fault. So I did gymnastics until you couldn't do gymnastics anymore. I'm in my 22nd year of pro wrestling. I've never even entertained the idea of stopping.
Right.
I stopped shaving however many years ago. I don't shave anymore. I became straight edge 22 years ago, something like that. Never thought about it again. So when I make a decision, it's like I'm all in on anything that I do. It was interesting. A fan actually recently kind of put this in perspective to me a bit, and it was very meaningful. And they essentially tweeted me something to the effect of like that I didn't get the credit I deserve for sort of helping to normalize straight edge in wrestling.
Yeah.
And I had never thought of that because it's just a personal decision, and I don't really care what anyone else does, to each their own. But it was a very meaningful tweet, and I was like, you know what, he's right, because I never conceptualized that when I did start in tons of locker rooms, obviously that was not the norm. And not only was it not the norm, but I was specifically told, like, not that you can't, but that, oh, you remind me of so-and-so, and they didn't last, and you'll never be able to do it, and you can't do that in wrestling, and et cetera, et cetera. And it made no sense to me because no one can force feed you a beer, or no one can like make you smoke. So I was like, that doesn't make it, how could you? Of course I could do it. like I have no interest in that stuff, and I won't do it. And now here we are, X number of years later, and I still am. And it is becoming not the norm, but certainly much more accepted. There wouldn't be, I don't think, a negative stigma with it. It wouldn't be, oh, that guy can't hang out, he's not one of the boys. It's not like this whole, I didn't realize how much I had set myself apart potentially negatively when I started with that, and how I had, sort of did set the tone for that for later generations. So I'm like struggling to answer it, even because it's like that fan just last week sort of pointed it out to me, and I'm sort of getting my head wrapped around it as far as like, hey, wow, that is something that like I can be, because it almost transcends wrestling as well. Like if I can help somebody with a decision like that, or inspire them, or just, my whole thing is I want there to be choices. Like if you choose to drink, awesome. If you choose not to, equally as awesome. That's all it's about. It's just there has to be a choice, and I feel like there really isn't. I feel like there's pressure to drink, and if you're not, it has to be explained. If you're not, it's weird. And I'm just all about having that choice. So it's amazing that that's sort of available to people now.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't mean to cut you off, but just to kind of yes and everything you're saying here right now, and it's cool to see you have some perspective on that. You talked about your love of Vice TV and how cool it is that Fightland's going to be after Dark Side of the Ring here on October 7th. That plane ride from hell episode that caught everybody, I think, a little off guard, and has really kind of sent a tremor out. That happened in 2000, right when you were starting, right? So to put things in perspective, like you've watched the business kind of grow from an era where we all saw what was kind of acceptable there to what it is now. And like, how does that feel to know that the business has kind of grown in a direction that's more you and less that, I guess, is what I was thinking,
For sure. And it's almost intentional, because it's like, a lot of that stuff, there was like hazing and like initiations and all of these like old timey concepts that never resonated with me. And I was like, man, I don't agree with any of this stuff. So then as I transitioned into more of like a veteran type role, I was like, I'm not going to carry those broken traditions forward consciously. and it wasn't just me, obviously, but like people of my generation. So you have like the Colt Cabanas and the CM Punks and guys that who could have stepped into that role and been like, this is the way it's always been, and this is what we'll continue, and wrestler's court, and all these antiquated ideas. And we almost consciously decided, no, like, I think that stuff's ridiculous. It doesn't need to exist. We're not going to like mess with people's bags and do all this garbage that existed. That I didn't see any point of it. So I myself made a conscious effort to not carry it forward. And it seems to be that's what people have decided to do and take it in this sort of new and more open direction. And yeah, I'm all for that. It's like we've learned from the generations previously, so it's like I think guys now want to have more longevity and more health and be more health conscious and kind of last longer. It's like, how many guys are going to wrestle for 22 years? And I genuinely, for considering all the things that I've done, I feel pretty good. So I should be either dead or broken or a wreck. And I still feel like all my best stuff is ahead of me. So, that's by design. You have to, stay on things like health and fitness and the mental aspects and just everything. So yeah, I'm proud to sort of help end some of those more broken traditions and bring things forward into a new light and a new day for wrestling.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it does seem like we are getting the best of pro wrestlers, I think, at the moment, behavior wise and just kind of leadership wise. And I'm excited to see how far it goes in that direction. We're only just now starting to really kind of reflect on, guys from the 90s. The 80s we've kind of played out, but the 90s period, those early 2000s, we're only just starting to dig into those stories. I cannot wait to see how this generation is like looked back on. It's almost like an age of revelation where, like, you see these these broken traditions going to the wayside, and kind of just the entrepreneurial spirit, the business acumen of the generation we're in right now. I feel like I don't know, you tell me, but I feel like light years away from where the business acumen of independent wrestlers was like 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, back in the day, barely anyone had merch, or they might have one shirt, or sort of 8x10s were the big thing. So if you were the name on the show, you might just have pictures. And you'll see that even now with some of the older guys and the last generation guys that still sort of travel, they will just have some 8x10s, or they won't do merch at all, or whatever it is. And now it's sort of, it's almost funnier to lump myself in with a newer generation at this point, but as a newer generation talent, yeah, the merch game is humongous, and I started realizing for myself, there's 52 weeks in a year, so 52 weekends. Mine fill up. So given Monday through Friday, I'm wearing many hats as a travel agent and this and that, essentially. But I was like, if all my weekends are full, how can I remain busy? How can I push myself forward? And that's when I came up with Wrestling is Forever. So it's the exact, like you're talking about, this sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And it's like, I was like, wait a minute, let me start. And I want to sort of capture like the spirit and the essence of what we're talking about. Because I think wrestling is a new thing. And it's like, these memories are forever. These injuries are forever. The CTE is forever. The friendships are forever. I mean, I'm going to be old and gray and hanging out with Gargano and Candice for sure. And we'll be like swimming in their little pool, talking about back in the day, like nursing all our injuries, just laughing about the insane lives we've had. Like that's a guarantee. And while we're swimming around in this pool, having the best friendship and the best time talking about these eternal memories, we'll be nursing those injuries. So I love that it encapsulates the good and the bad. And that's what I try to, again, capture with this Wrestling is Forever. And it was that same idea of like, I want to push the culture forward. No one's really, I see that in skateboarding. I see that in parkour. I see that in punk rock. I see that in all these other things. And then so often I would see wrestling still caught in this little more static, hard cam, old school, old boys club. That's the way it is. And I was like, everything else has evolved. Like the music, movies, television, they're not what our grandparents watched. Like we don't sit down and put on a like record and it's like, and we're like, that sounds great. Like every other form of entertainment and whatever has evolved so much, except for wrestling. So I think like we were lagging behind as an industry and as a culture. So I want to sort of help push that forward. And that's what we present. That's the way it's presented. That's camera angles. That's just more of a new aged feel. That's getting rid of some of the stigmas and some of the other stuff. So instead of sitting around being like, man, I wish someone would do that, I was like, well, let me do my part. It's like I almost have this authority to publish, if you will. And it's like, who else has been wrestling for 22 years and been to 29 different countries with it? So like, I alone, in some regards, have this very worldly view of wrestling. A lot of times people get stuck in these bubbles, whatever it is, whether it's their company or their city or their state or their country. And then they don't realize like what the scene is like in Egypt, and compare and contrast that with Russia, and compare and contrast that with Sudan. And so I can see like, holy crap, we are in this worldwide wrestling community. Like, we like this very weird thing that is worldwide. And so like, I have that perspective that I try to bring with me everywhere, whether it be through the Wrestling's Forever company, whether it be through my matches, whether it be when I'm speaking. I try to bring more of that worldly view, because I don't know if anyone's ever seen sort of the far-reaching corners of what we do. So, I mean, just a long-winded answer to the question, but yeah, there's just guys are sort of thinking bigger, thinking outside the box, pushing things forward, whether that be through the branding and social media and all this kind of stuff. And it's like wrestling 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever phase or world that we're in. It's sort of reinventing it.
Yeah, and it's amazing because like, and I feel like, you know, we're going a little long here, but that's all right. I promise, Sean, I'll put a button on this in just a moment. But, you know, you look at what happened in the 90s with how quickly things got big and then how quickly things kind of fell down. And I don't know about you, but I don't see that same parallel or parabola happening in this situation. Like, I feel like things are kind of just spiraling off into the sky, and we don't really know how far this thing's going to go. I feel like wrestling's in for a pretty hot ride here with the more structured and better minds that are in play right now with everything that's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the only thing holding us back are these like antiquated beliefs that like, oh, it's fake or whatever. But I think, you know, I had someone trying to make fun of wrestling recently, and what they said was so poignant to me, because they were like, I don't know why anyone would watch that. It's like an amateur stunt show. And I thought to myself, my God, not only are you right, but you've also nailed why I and everyone likes it. It is like an amateur. If I saw a flyer that said amateur stunt show, I would buy a ticket immediately. That is what it's like, and that's why it's awesome. So, you know, it's so still, it's going to start to be appreciated for what it is, because what it is so genuinely unique. And as more and more mediums and more media cover it and look into it, and the personalities and what we do behind the scenes, as all of that stuff kind of comes to light, like you said, I think we're at a high point, and we're only going to go up from here.
Yeah. All right. Last thing here. I got a hard out in 2 minutes. I would love to have you back, obviously, Matt. I feel like there's a lot of things we could still discuss, but Azteca Underground is coming back, or I guess the reboot of what is the legacy of Lucha Underground is coming back. Are we going to get Son of Havoc? You going to be involved? What's your take, I guess, on what's going on with Azteca Lucha Underground? You know,
yeah, the future is unwritten. We'll see. You know, obviously, I carry the spirit of that company with me strongly. I mean, I think Pentagon Jr. was one of the names that just absolutely exploded in that universe. But he was a guy that, you know, had cool vignettes and cool promos and won every match and was the man. Whereas I was sort of this organic build, and it was just people connecting with me and my hard work. And like, what's your favorite Son of Havoc vignette? There wasn't really any. So it's just pure workhorse, like bust ass stuff that people identified with. And that resonates within me, and I carry that forward. So that spirit's undying. It's within me. So we'll see where it goes in a new temple or a new place or a new company or Azteca Underground or whatever it may be. So that stuff, you know, again, that fire still burns within me, and we'll see how that plays out in MLW.
All right. Hey, Matt, M-Dog, thank you so much for taking the time. This was a wonderful conversation. Where can people go to find you, follow you, support you, all those great things?
Sure. The best way to support is wrestlingisforever.com. And then all my socials are M-Dog Matt Cross.